Everyone, welcome to the Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities of May 25th, 2022, reconvening from May 18th, 2022. This committee meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Port 14 of the Procedure Bylaw. As such, committee members may participate in person or by electronic means. Committee members participating by electronic means are reminded, in accordance with Section 14.13 of the Procedure Bylaw, video must be enabled in order to confirm quorum. Members are also asked to please advise the clerk if you need to leave the meeting. If a committee member loses connection during a voting process, staff will get you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. Staff contact information has been circulated to you. Video of committee members speaking, presentations, and vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. Members of the public who wish to participate are encouraged to submit comments online or participate via telephone. Let me start by acknowledging that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for having cared for this land, look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. And I also want to take a moment to recognize the incredible contributions of our City of Vancouver staff who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Councillor Carr in the chair. Mayor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Tijanova.
Present.
Councillor Fry.
Present.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly. And Councillor Kirby-Young has a leave of absence from 3 to 6:30 for civic business. You have quorum, Chair Carr.
Thank you. Today we are going to continue hearing from speakers on the Broadway plan, starting with speaker 67. Speakers should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of our meetings so they don't miss your turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on @Van City Clerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversion, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. I remind council that when addressing speakers and staff, please avoid using gendered honorifics and instead refer to the person by first and last name or role or title. As a reminder, this meeting is scheduled from 3 to 5 p.m. today. Should the business not be completed, the meeting will reconvene tomorrow, Thursday, May 26th, 2022 at 3 p.m. and we will run with a 1-hour break for dinner from 5 to 6, but otherwise we'll run till 10 p.m. Finally, I would like to remind council members that if amendments are brought forward, please submit them to the city clerk in final written form before the council member introduces them. And please ensure the clerk has received your amendments by using council meeting amendments-DL. Okay, this is our item, Broadway plan. Before we begin, I want to remind speakers you have 5 minutes to make comments, should state whether you are in support or in opposition to the recommendations, and may only speak once. Committee members, you have up to 3 minutes to ask questions to speakers. However, as you know, speakers are under no obligation to respond. I will also ask if speakers are residents of Vancouver if it's not already noted on our speakers list. Following the last speaker on the speakers list for this item, I will go back through the list for those who are not present when their name was initially called. I'll only go through that once. It's not public hearing, so we'll do a once through at the end. We will now continue hearing from the registered speakers, starting with speaker 67, Yevgen Sekretariak. Yevgen Sekretariat on the line.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can, clearly. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone. My name is Yevgen. I'm a 20-year-old student who just graduated from UBC, living south down Fraser, constantly in the Broadway area, and I am in support of the Broadway plan. I, just as many other adults in Vancouver, am struggling to find any sort of accommodation within Vancouver, whether it's renting or buying, although that's clearly out of the picture. The citizens here are having a massive demand that is constantly growing and expected to further increase. The Amazon building going up will contain thousands of workers. The new Deloitte office came up. The new Salesforce office came up. These are families that need a place to live. Do you prefer to commute from Coquitlam or Maple Ridge or heck, even Langley? The city of Vancouver needs to become a city, sustaining the growing populations and the future migrating families. Additionally, it is the matter of urban densification that will assist in community building, creating relationships, more friends, engagements and activities, and overall a friendly Vancouver atmosphere. How is that going to be achieved? Consider chances of interactions that are much greater when there's simply a greater population density in the city. That means increased flows of information and exchanges of ideas, spurring innovations, and producing other creative thinking. That's not even mentioning the pure economic impact of the construction, creating plenty of jobs and dealing with the housing supply issue Vancouver has been having for years. Then, the safety aspects are introduced with a more tight-knit community, reduced vehicle traffic flows with additional dedicated bicycle lanes, and improved pedestrian walkways for families with children, all important for individuals to be outside. Being outside is important as for myself as a student, as for everyone else to whose mental health this would be a great contribution. The Broadway plan should be acted upon now. It's critical that we not only proceed with such a development plan immediately, but even build taller buildings with larger units for our families, utilizing space efficiently within the area. As mentioned by many speakers before me, this is a small step in the right direction, and we should further engage in increasing our housing supply in Vancouver. We need to bring vibrance and growth to our community. Currently, I'm planning to move to live in Western Europe, where opportunities of prosperity are given in greater quantities. But does Vancouver want more youth and younger adults to plan for that too? Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. There are no questions for you, but again, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this.
Thank you so much.
Speaker 68, Rupert Campbell, intended to be at least on this list in person, but I'm not seeing Rupert Campbell in the chambers. Is Rupert Campbell on the line?
Speaker 68 is not on the line.
Thanks very much. Speaker 69, Marie-Andre Asselin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Go
Excellent.
ahead. Yes, go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Marie-Andre Asselin, and I'm the Executive Director of the BC Francophone Parents Federation, a not-for-profit organization who represent 37 parent advisory councils in School District 93 schools, and 11 parent organizations in the early years sector. A total of 7 of our members are in the city of Vancouver itself. The Federation also runs 9 childcare centers. One of them is in Vancouver. We are a provincial organization. However, our office is located in Vancouver in the Broadway corridor. In fact, our office is in the Maison de la Francophonie building on West 7th Avenue between Granville and First Street. Half of our 12 office employees reside in the city of Vancouver. Some are lucky and walk or bike to work. And all of the team will be impacted by the Broadway plan, as we are also taking transit or sometimes the car to come to the office or to social and cultural activities in the city. As you may know from the first session of the hearing last week, the Maison de la Francophonie would like to undertake a redevelopment project. The Parent Federation strongly support the Broadway plan as presented because it is very well aligned with the needs of the families we represent and with the development of the project of a brand new building for la Maison de la Francophonie de Vancouver, which will include offices, learning and meeting spaces, a theater, other cultural and community spaces, and also housing. The redevelopment project is important for our organization, for the community of Vancouver, and for the Francophone community and for the broader community as well. Spaces for learning and cultural appreciation is a really important need for the families. After school activities and social connection for our children would have a very positive impact on the life of the family we serve. We are happy to see community and cultural amenity considered and included in the Broadway plan as presented. Talking about families, it will not be a surprise to you if I say that we definitely need more childcare spaces in the city of Vancouver, and more specifically French childcare centers, as those early learning places are very important for fostering the French language and culture in our children. Childcare centers need to be located centrally on transit, walking distance to parks, and other cultural amenities. Currently in Vancouver, there is only 28 full-time childcare spaces that offer programming in French. This is definitely not enough, as we currently have more than 100 children on the waiting list for Francophone childcare in Vancouver only. We commend city staff for the opportunity the Broadway plan offers to provide more much-needed childcare in the corridor, bringing organizations like us closer to fulfilling the needs of parents of young children. We need a range of housing options to support diversity in our community. We want to see housing connected to community spaces, offices, and childcare centers. Balancing land uses in such a way will ultimately build a strong sense of community, which is so important to support families. Thank you for your good work on the Broadway plan, and thank you for taking the time to hear us during this public consultation.
And thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on this issue. There are no questions for you. Greatly appreciate your presence, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker 70, Patrick Condon.
I speak in opposition to the plan as it's presently constituted and hope that Council will find the opportunity to make amendments. But thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I really honor your ability to pay close attention to so many speakers. Out of respect for your time and in the hopes of attending to an issue that has not been effectively dealt with, I will focus on just one issue: affordable housing. I am appreciative of the robust tenant protection included in the plan and see this as a very positive step forward. I am thankful for the work of staff on this important topic and the support of the Council for the same. Concerns for the economic and social well-being of the thousands of existing residents of this corridor is paramount. At the same time, I note with some alarm that the number of affordable units imagined in this plan amounts to a small fraction of the total, 6,000 out of the 30,000 units, or 20% of the total. Of that 20%, we rightfully presume that the bulk of those units will be eventually occupied by those neighborhood residents who are displaced. But the unfortunate consequence of this may be that all of the other units built in the plan will be unaffordable to those making average household wages of $75,000 and below. Thus, the plan leaves out affordable housing for the average family, families who most need housing close to jobs, transit, and the rich amenities of this district. I also note with alarm that staff suggests that some of this 20% is contingent on funding from higher levels of government, so it's not guaranteed. Thus, we may see less than 20% of units affordable to average wage earners and below. So the plan as written allows for the possibility or the probability of there being no net increase in the percentage of affordable units over what the district presently contains. And aside from relocated tenants, none of the new units will be affordable. Of course, purpose-built market rental units are often assumed to be more affordable, and due to this, are largely exempt from land lift charges. But with some of the new two-bedroom units on West Broadway now already renting for over $3,600 a month, it's hard to conscience lumping new market rentals in new buildings together with units that are actually affordable. This seems like a dramatic step backward for the city. It seems to me that there must be a better way to expand affordability than the ones contemplated here. Let me make a suggestion. The city has already committed to a DCE charge, which is really a land lift capture charge of $340 per square foot to return to the city. Taking just half the minimum number of units contemplated as condominiums at an average of 1,000 square feet, that would generate almost $5 billion in revenue. $5 billion is enough to offset construction costs for almost 15,000 family-sized units. In other words, 50% of the total 30,000 units could be affordable, not 20%. Of course, land costs must be considered, but these residents making median wages can afford median rents, rents that can offset land and operating costs, like any co-op ordinarily does. Of course, this kind of back-of-the-envelope computation needs more scrutiny. An issue of this magnitude, much like any critical medical issue, for example, deserves more than one consultant opinion that you have received. I suggest that now is the time to bring in an outside consultancy to elaborate on strategies that are similar to the ones I am suggesting. Hopefully that consultancy will have a strong record in understanding how to leverage private investment and captured land lift for the public benefit of affordable non-market housing. There are many other ways that this plan might be improved, but under present circumstances, I would put this question at the top of the list. How can we assure that at least half of this housing is affordable to those who need it most? How can we retain our service workers, those who make average salaries and below, those families who make our city run, some of whom are our own sons and daughters? How can we use this project to ensure that they will no longer need to abandon our city because they can't pay the price? Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you. And you do have
Chair,
questions?
it's Jean here. Could I get on the list? My Creston isn't working.
Yep. You're on now. You're second. Councillor Hardwick, go ahead first for 3 minutes.
Thanks very much, Patrick. As you've said before, that affordability, housing affordability starts at the ground level with the dirt and the price of the land underlying all this development. How you noted in a recent op-ed that setting more reasonable population and job targets might help us, I guess, rationalize the scope of the development here and the impact on land inflation. Is that something that you've thought about in the overall affordability paradigm?
Yes, it is, Councillor, and the suggestion to re-examine the population intentions along the corridor was largely prompted by the fact that the Seneca project and the Jericho project have not been considered as part of this plan. So there's quite a bit of population already coming in. I've also noted that there's already 20,000 dwelling units that have been approved during the term of this council, many of which are in the corridor. So I think it's logical for us to re-examine that. However, the largest influence on land prices that I can see is the fact that the city is in the habit of increasing allowable density without capturing the land lift that comes as a consequence of that new allowable density. The city seems to do this in the misguided belief, I believe, that will enhance affordability by simply increasing supply. My observation and my research tends to show that rather than increasing affordability, it only enhances the value of the land underneath that new allowed project area, and the only beneficiary of that is the land speculator. So I think that our efforts to upzone areas in the absence of capturing land lift typically work against our best intentions to create affordability.
Putting out fire with gasoline, as I think I saw you say.
Well, I have said that in the past.
What about requiring that 50% of new housing will be permanently affordable non-market rental housing? How do you contemplate that?
I've spoken to that issue before. I think we have a wonderful legacy here in the city of Vancouver, co-op housing. We also have a number of very good nonprofit housing providers, and council has considered ways.
Patrick, if you can hear me, you've cut out. Patrick? Oh, sorry. Clerk, is Patrick on the line? Patrick Condon, sorry.
Rats.
Just one moment, we're confirming.
You are out of time, though, Councillor Hardwick, although you have another 5 seconds or maybe 7 seconds.
Well, yeah, it's too late. I don't know if we'll get him back, but I see Councillor Swanson is on.
Yeah,
with question.
the clerks are going to investigate. They'll report back.
Sorry, Chair, he's disconnected.
Okay, so at this point, sorry, Councillor Hardwick, Councillor Swanson will have to, I mean, he may call back in if he does for questions. Clerk, would we allow him back on the line at some point if he does call back in?
Only speak.
It wouldn't be to speak, it would be to answer questions, I think. We have two. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So that it will be council's, if he does call back in, it will be at council's discretion as to whether or not we want to let him answer questions. So meanwhile, I'll move on to Speaker 71, Craig Jorgensen. Is Craig Jorgensen on the line?
Speaker 71 is not on the line.
Okay. Speaker 72, John Barclay Donovan.
Speaker 72 is not on the line.
Speaker 73, Gail Gavin.
On the line.
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Gail. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak. I'm opposing the Broadway plan. I'm a practicing lawyer, and I would like to speak about the current tenant relocation and protection policy passed unanimously by this Council June 11, 2019, referencing the plight of residents being displaced by demolition of existing affordable housing, and how to effectively use this policy. I will be referencing the provisions of the Tenant Relocation and Protection Policy that provides, quote, key action to strengthen protection for existing residents at risk, using its authority through the rezoning and development permit application process. The policy requires each developer applicant to provide city staff with its tenant relocation policy based on policy requirements. And with respect to the most vulnerable residents, people with low income, seniors, people with disability, and with health issues, amongst others, the applicant developer must provide a plan that at a minimum, if we look at Section 4 of the plan, I think it's 4.2a, limits the impact of relocation by making every effort to secure a permanent replacement option meeting affordability requirements that involve minimal moves for each resident and prioritize options in the current neighborhood. And options in the current neighborhood are deemed suitable or outside the neighborhood only if the tenant agrees. And then the developer must provide a plan that maintains affordability for existing residents, which means the relocation plan must provide a suitable and affordable replacement accommodation option for existing tenants paying rent geared to income, priced at rents that are no higher than what they are eligible for based on existing subsidies, and for all other tenants existing no more than higher of 30% or the current rent. Also, the developer must pay for at least $750 toward the cost of moving and more to help people who need more help. And importantly, the right of first refusal for a comparable unit in the new development at the same rate if it is deemed, I suppose, by council or its staff, the developer can afford to pay it. So nonprofits are receiving considerable benefits. A recent upzoning in the heart of the corridor allowed a nonprofit charitable foundation on property it owned for close to 100 years to increase units from 21 to 135, with rent increases currently $450 to $850 a month, to a possible increase using nonprofit or affordable housing rent rates of about $1,450 to $4,100 a month for 108 of the new units. Exemptions from paying CACs and development costs of about $5.7 million, as well as grants from the city and CMHC. It is my concern that relocation and protection policy provisions are not consistently and accurately applied. Staff have told me that residents are entitled to only 2 out of the 3 affordable housing in the neighborhood, and they've added in a unit of approximately the same time. Or sometimes there is no entitlement, I'm told, to a replacement in the same neighborhood. Developer applicants are out looking for suitable replacing units in existing nonprofit housing all over the Lower Mainland to meet their obligations, and we know very little exists. Rather than topping up rents until the residents can occupy the new building as is provided in the policy. The disconnect gap is causing vulnerable people a great deal of stress, unhappiness, depression, and feelings of hopelessness. So how can council use this tool effectively? One idea I give is that you dedicate resources to carrying out this policy and take it outside of the busy lives of the planning department. Establish an implementation group with legal support dedicated to approving only mandatory tenant replacement plans that meet policy requirements and ensuring that the policy is carried out. As to governance, I suggest it should include tenants to appoint people to the group and, importantly, allow a resident representative from each development site to attend and have input in the process to ensure that relocation and protection policy is carried out according to the policy. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Well timed. There are no questions for you. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you.
Yes. Clerk, is Patrick Condon back on the line?
Yes, he is.
Okay, Council, it's not due process, so I would need someone to move to allow Patrick Condon to continue with answering questions of Council, just because of the timing. So if someone wants to move that, I'll test for consensus.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Great. Okay, I'm going to just have you get Patrick speaking, and I'm going to put... Okay, Councillor Hardwick. Patrick Condon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Councillor Hardwick ran out of her time in asking questions, but if you remember the last question that you were answering, we'll receive your answer now.
I don't remember.
It's okay.
I think it
Councillor
was
Hardwick.
on.
Yeah, maybe Councillor Hardwick,
basically,
just a second. Councillor Hardwick, if you could be very brief in repeating your question, please.
Yes, it was, you noted the 50% of new housing will be permanently affordable, that one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Basically, my run-on sentence could be compressed as follows. We have a lot of co-ops. We have a number of thousands of co-op units in the city, and we know how to do that. And with the advantages that I've talked about in terms of streaming land rent towards co-op providers or non-market housing providers, charitable organizations who do housing, of which we have quite a number of corporations, we could meet that 50% target, I believe. But don't take it from me. Basically, my recommendation is to bring in a specialist who understands the real estate economics of non-profit, non-market housing, and see if the financial plan for the Broadway corridor can be adjusted to meet that target.
Great, that's wonderful. You do have more questions. Thank you. That's your time, Councillor Hardwick. On to
Thanks, Patrick.
On to Councillor Swanson. You have up to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Patrick. What do you think of the plan to abolish the development cost expectation?
I think that's a huge mistake because the only beneficiary, first I'll say, if you just abolish it, that's a huge mistake because the only beneficiary of that would be the landowner / speculator. It's putting money into their pockets. My larger point, which is, I think, worth repeating, is that our efforts to allow additional density don't meet our desired effect, which is affordable housing. What they do is they enrich the landowner. And we can see that progression of land value increases as a consequence of increase density throughout the city, not just on the Broadway corridor. The DCE and also the CAC are essentially a tax on land value, and it would be a big mistake to eliminate or even reduce the DCE. That money is in the billions of dollars, and it really doesn't bode against the viability of market products. What it does is reduces the residual value of the land upon which that project may be constructed. That's as clear as I can be on that one.
I think the idea is to abolish the flat rate DCE and replace it with individually negotiated community amenity contributions. Do you think that would be a way to go?
Well, I think other parts of the city have a preset CAC, whatever you want to call it, DCE or CAC, and I think that gives the market predictability. It lets the land market understand what to expect in terms of development taxes, and make no mistake about it, the CAC is a tax. So it lets the land market understand what the presumed taxes are going to be, so that the landowner will adjust their prices in accordance. If the DCE or the CAC is eliminated, that makes that basically stimulates the land market to ask for more for their properties. I generally am not in favor of the idea of negotiating the CAC for every single project that comes down the pike, because that does not give landowners and developers certainty about what to expect in terms of their necessary contributions. Necessary contribution to the city as part of the project that they anticipate. It's far better to have it very transparent and clear what's expected. And I think the $340 per interior square foot actually is a minimum amount to ask in this way from the land markets.
And that's it for Councillor Swanson's time, but you have more questions. Thanks, Councillor Swanson. On to you, Councillor Wiebe.
Yeah, mine was a follow-up on that. We're hearing that preset CACs would allow the land to be suppressed in value, and because instead the developers are having to come in and purchase land without knowing how much they'll pay. And so then the higher they pay for a property, they'd have to assume it in the new valuation for doing pro forma. So is that a follow-up to the point you had with Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, I agree with you, Councillor Wiebe. I think transparency, again, it would be useful to have another consultant come in to give a second opinion on all this. But my observation is the transparency and a preset, call it CAC or DCE, whatever you want to call it, is very valuable in managing the land markets, or what I sometimes call disciplining the land markets. You on this council have all the authority necessary to discipline land markets and to stream what would otherwise be speculative value that goes into the pockets of land speculators into public benefit. And my conversation today is talking about the public benefit of non-market housing.
Okay, and then a second point you made, just want to clarify, is that you believe we should be bringing in a pro forma expert from the nonprofit housing sector to look at how we can ensure that we can make the delivery of non-market, co-op, and other forms of housing a priority in this plan.
I think it would be valuable because from my outside observation, it seems that the presumed strategy for affordability here has been largely one that depends on the private marketplace to deliver that affordability. Nothing against that. I understand that whole strategy, but I'm suggesting there's another completely different strategy that looks at leveraging from the vigor of the private marketplace, which is capable of producing $340 per square foot, as we well know, and asking the question, how could we stream that revenue source or a significant portion of that revenue source towards our larger objective of affordable housing, and rather than depending on the private developers to deliver that, stream that money to the nonprofit sector, which could also deliver that. It might even be the same people. Developers often have a nonprofit branch, so we have the best developers in the world, and I'm sure that many of them would be interested in such a, a cost-plus project.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Wieben, I have put myself on the list. Patrick, I'm just curious about the quote that you included at $340 per square foot in terms of a DCE charge. Two questions regarding that. One is that the lift above whatever is currently zoned? And secondly, is that, is that have you done an average of what we currently do charge in DCLs, I'm sorry, in CACs or a DCE on rezonings?
The $340 figure, Counselor, I just drew directly from your website under the DCE section. It's listed there. That number tends to be higher, I think, than what I've been told is the CAC number for like the Canby corridor, which is, I think, I was told by a friend of mine that it's in the development industry that it's about $160 per square foot, which I think is way too low. But again, consultants are more credible than I am on that one. But I do know that the value, the raw value of a buildable square foot in the city of Vancouver, if it's unencumbered by CAC or DCEs, is in the range of over $600 in value. So asking $340 for that, basically the gift of that density that the council supplies, in other words, capturing that percentage of land lift and perhaps more, is within the realm of the possible and also within the realm of the advantageous as well. This city has North America's best tradition of capturing land lift for public benefit going back to the 1980s with the development of Yaletown. I'm sure that Larry Beasley would answer questions about that history. And I think my own feeling is we've sort of forgotten the possibility of capturing that land lift and using it for public benefit.
Great. Again, just to answer the second part of my question, would this be just on moving forward above what is for density above what is currently zoned? And I'm assuming also for market housing.
Yes, that's been our tradition here, right, that when you go above the existing zoning, which you are all contemplating now, that's why this is so important. If you just increase the allowable density without carefully considering capturing this land lift, you miss the chance. And it's very difficult to turn around 2 years from now and go back and say, oops, we made a mistake. We're going to increase the DC, the CAC.
Great. Thank you. I am out of time, but you have answered my questions. Thanks so much. And that's it for your questions. Thank you so much for calling back in so we could question you.
Thank you so much for listening.
Great. Okay, moving on to Speaker 74, Roberta Olenek.
Speaker 74 is not on the line.
Okay, Speaker 75, Olivia Edwards.
Speaker 75 is not on the line.
Speaker 76, Carol Volkart.
My name is Carol Volkart. I am a Dunbar resident. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Carol Volkart. I am a Dunbar resident opposed to the Broadway plan. Councillors, I sympathize as you sit through yet another marathon hearing on a controversial plan. You must be setting records for long public hearings and quantities of correspondence. I applaud your patience, but I also ask you to stop and think about the reasons for this. Is it because you are at odds with so many of your constituents? Is it because you are not consulting and listening to the people whose lives will be affected by these plans? I thought about this when I came across a booklet recently entitled The Dunbar Community Vision. It was a planning exercise for my community that begun in early 1997 and approved by City Council in the fall of 1998. It described a completely different process, a completely different attitude toward both residents and how planning was done. Compared to today, it seemed naive, touching, and maybe even a little bit quaint. The assumption was that residents who know and love their neighborhood could be trusted to come up with plans for its future, plans that would be acceptable both to their fellow citizens and to the city. Another big assumption was that residents' opinions really mattered, that accurate surveys should be done and the results treated with respect. Nothing went forward without majority approval. The Dunbar Community Vision was part of a larger overall plan known as City Plan Directions for Vancouver. The city set overall directions and neighborhoods brought them to the community level. The Dunbar process began with community outreach and a weekend ideas fair. Then came intensive public workshops with over 100 people spending many hours developing ideas and options. The results went into a survey distributed to all households, businesses, and property owners. Over 1,600 people from every block in Dunbar responded, and the community vision was created out of their responses. 21 months after the process began, Council approved the plan. The way the survey was conducted was interesting. There were essentially two, one general and one random, with the latter done to confirm the results of the former. For a measure to be approved, it had to have majority support in both surveys. The final report included all the numbers with the agree, neutral, disagree responses for each measure. Granted, the Dunbar project was small potatoes compared to the Broadway plan, which involved several neighborhoods and a subway line. But it showed a trust in and respect for citizens that made for a smoother, faster, and more harmonious process. It took less than 2 years, and the final report was 46 pages. Here are some things I think we can learn from it. One is the value of residents being deeply involved in planning their area's future. If people from the Broadway plan neighborhoods had had this chance, I expect a very different, less divisive plan would have emerged. Given reasonable database growth expectations to work with, they would have found ways of incorporating new people, homes, and jobs into their areas while keeping them livable. And they'd have insisted on the park space and amenities needed for a bigger population. Contrast this with the anger and disruption caused by a top-down plan initiated by staff, imposed with little meaningful public consultation. The second point is, who gets a say? The Dunbar model was restricted to those in the area only. The rest of the city wasn't asked to weigh in on Dunbar's future. The current strategy is to allow anyone from anywhere and even invite stakeholder groups such as developers to participate. Is this fair? Surely the voices of those who must live directly with the consequences should far outweigh those of outsiders, if outsiders get any say at all. A third point is the way the public opinion is viewed and treated. There has been a sea change from the Dunbar days, when accuracy, precision, and transparency were almost sacrosanct. COVID was an excellent cover for avoiding public input while this plan was rushed through. There have been slanted surveys driving respondents to the right conclusion, vague summaries of public input, often without numbers, and limited online workshops where public comment is muted. The result is general mistrust. You're spending hours listening to angry residents because you're not consulting them in the first place. Redo the Broadway plan from the ground up, this time with the full engagement of the people who live and work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You do have questions, so just stay on the line. Councillor Hardwick, go ahead, up to 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Carol. It's refreshing to hear this from others. The methodology that you described was the practice of the city. You have a sense of when this sea change happened, because I've observed it too, but I'd be interested in hearing your perspective.
I think that it would have come after all the neighborhood community plans that are now going to be wiped out by the Broadway plan if it's approved. So there was this whole history of listening to residents and involving them deeply, and somehow after all those neighborhood plans were done, and I'm not sure the dates of those, this whole idea seemed to have changed, that residents should kind of take a back seat, and that somebody else was going to come up with the big ideas and then ask them what they thought about it. And this, I think it happened over the Vision Council, and I think this council has basically continued that process.
When I've asked this question about the process with staff broadly, the response I get is we've done tons of public consultation. Look at all of these, online surveys as you've described and touch points. How do you think touch points are perceived by the public? Do you think that the public they're just not paying attention? They don't care, or what's your take on it?
I think most of the public don't even know this process is going on. I'm sure if I walked down my street and knocked to my neighbors' doors, most of them would say, what Broadway plan? What Vancouver plan? So in some way, we are missing getting in touch with the people or the city is missing, contacting the people who should know what's going on. And I think that's partly due to the lack of, general media that used to spread this stuff around. I also think that COVID shut everything down. I think everything went online, and not all the public, particularly older people, are online all the time. So basically, I think the city is not contacting the people who are going to be really affected by this until really it's too late.
So your advice is that this should go back to a public process and come forward at a future date?
Yes, I think it should be totally redone, and I think that neighborhoods should be deeply involved. And I think that, it would be unrealistic to have volunteers do it the way the old Dunbar plan did it, because it would be just too much work and people don't have that much time. But they could work very closely with staff to come up with plans that would be acceptable to everybody.
Okay, that's it for your time now. Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor, and thanks so much, Carol, for taking the time to phone in and to answer questions.
Thank you very much.
Speaker 77, Dave Laviat.
Speaker 77 is not on the line.
Speaker 78 has withdrawn. Speaker 79, and Andrei Mihaliuk.
Speaker 79 is not on the line.
Okay, Speaker 80, David Webb, is in person, and he is indeed in person. You step, yes, keep going, see whether it's rising, yes. And you'll speak into the mic that has the red yes on it.
Okay. Honorable Mayor and Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. It feels odd saying that to a nearly empty room, but I'm here to voice my opposition to the Broadway plan, because for me, it represents an existential threat. For me and for every renter in Mount Pleasant, from Clark to Maine, and from Broadway to Great Northern Way. In fact, for residents in the entirety of the plan, but I'm here to speak for Mount Pleasant. Perhaps if Vancouver boasted a ward system instead of the current at-large confusion, I wouldn't have to. The plan upzones this neighborhood from 3 stories to many times that height, even higher along Broadway itself. This will greatly increase property values and tax assessments, providing both a carrot and a stick to landlords. Huge windfalls can be expected if they sell, and higher costs should they choose not to, forcing the area's redevelopment. A guaranteed replication of the devastation at Metrotown, which looked a lot like Mount Pleasant before those towers, now visible across Vancouver, were built. I predict that the low-rise buildings in my neighborhood will be among the first on the chopping block in a developer's feeding frenzy, simply because they are among the least expensive. This will result in the displacement and dispossession of countless tenants who are now paying some of the lowest rents in this city. In my building, that means $860 to $1,200 for sizable one-bedroom apartments. And that $340 discrepancy, by the way, reflects the city's continued failure to institute meaningful rent control. If low-cost housing is truly a goal of this plan, then why not protect what already exists? Simply keeping the current zoning would go a long way toward accomplishing this. The affordability of Mount Pleasant is a direct result of the way it was zoned. The city planners have been told by developers that this zoning stands in the way of redevelopment. And when staff boldly speak of renewing and replacing aging rental stock. In loaded and pejorative language, what they mean is demolishing affordable homes. If your goal is to evict the working class and the poor from the city, please have the courage to say so. Developers have been expressing their frustration with rezoning applications, public consultation, and red tape, otherwise known as due process, for decades. This plan's reason for being is to satisfy their demands and ease their frustrations, to speed up redevelopment. Why else must huge swaths of Vancouver be rezoned at the stroke of a pen? The renter protection plan proposed by Mayor Stewart in a move to preempt resistance to the broadway plan is of little interest and much less comfort. We don't want to move. I lived in the building I call home for 23 years. Many others in the building and in the area have similar tenures. The benefit from the RPP would mean moving twice, with all the stress that entails, and contingent on the extremely unlikely chance of finding an affordable place in the meantime. Returning to the sites of our former homes after years of forced exile, we would find ourselves in vastly altered neighborhoods, in smaller apartments, and with significantly higher rents, even if the renter protection plan somehow proves enforceable. And I really don't see how it could be enforced. Finally, the plan is undemocratic. It was not mentioned in the last civic election. Its survey's methodologies are deeply flawed, as has already been pointed out, and what we've seen presented has been closer to advertising than to objective information. I wonder why the need is felt to push it through now and to do so as quickly as possible. It is the most substantive proposal Vancouver has seen in decades, and it will affect us for decades to come. If Council approves this plan, you will be abdicating your responsibility to protect the citizens who trust you, to consider them and their well-being when you make your decisions. If you support the plan, you can tell us why in your next election campaign. I urge Council to reject this proposal. Thank you.
And thank you. Do you want to just stay there? You do have some questions.
Okay.
Councillor Hardwick, go ahead, up to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, David. The subway is coming whether we like it or not.
True.
There's got to be some form of development that's going to accompany it. What would be your advice?
Well, I think first of all, why is the rezoning is targeting existing affordable rentals, and everybody in this room or who would be in this room or council here in person knows that Mount Pleasant is one of those areas, and yet it's targeted for massive rezoning. This whole plan is a massive rezoning. I mean, why not rezone areas of single-family homes? I mean, I love some of those homes. Some of them are beautiful. That's great, but I mean, in that case, at least the seller would have agency, right? It's his home he's selling, or her home, and it's he or her who stands to profit. Whereas renters in Mount Pleasant stand only to lose. You know, we have nothing to gain from this, nothing. You know, it might be great for future residents, but for people who live here now, it's a terrible plan. It's awful.
You mentioned that you felt that this process was undemocratic at the end of your comments, but you started it with a reference to a ward system. Do you think it would make a big difference if there were a ward system or some form of community representation in place in evaluating projects like this?
Yes, I really do. I think that the at-large system is, I mean, there's like, for instance, okay, I live in Mount Pleasant. Like, who's the counselor that I turn to for my concerns? I mean, it doesn't work that way, and it should. I mean, that's what democracy is about. I was really disheartened, I don't know, it was about 20 years ago or so when there was a referendum about having a ward plan. Why it was voted down, I don't know. I wish it hadn't been. You know, when I first started looking at this Broadway plan, I thought, okay, there's nobody on council, you know, that I can turn to except maybe Jean Swanson, but her remit is really, you know, the downtown east side. So I emailed her. I emailed Melanie Mark, you know, or I think that's her name, the MLA, and the MP, Jenny Kwan. I got no response from any of those three. And that was disheartening too. I just like, you know, it seems essential to me that there's more granular democracy, and with the at-large system, it's who knows who I'm supposed to turn to, or any resident of any neighborhood is supposed to turn to with their concerns.
Your other comment, sorry to interrupt because I'm out of time, but you meant that you thought that this was more of a sales approach to the surveys than genuine seeking of input.
Absolutely.
What made you come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
sorry,
I'm
Councillor
not
Hardwick,
the
you
first
are.
to mention.
Excuse me, sorry. She is out of time. Sorry for that. She
So
has
can I answer the question? Or?
No, but if you have more questions.
Oh.
Councillor DiGenova, over to you for 3 minutes. Councillor DiGenova, we can't hear you.
I was just unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. Just to follow up to one of the questions or the answers that you gave to Councillor Hardwick, you had mentioned that you would email councillors. Did you only email one councillor or did you email all councillors?
I have emailed all councilors. I sent a letter sometime before this hearing, but I was thinking of who, politically might be more sympathetic to my views. So my first attempt was Gene Swanson, and like I said, the MLA and the MP who represent East Vancouver. So I might not have emailed you.
I'm just trying to, if I may, sorry, I have another question for you. I'm trying to understand if your concern is being able to have someone or to have a representative that represents you, isn't it better to have 10 people and then you can kind of navigate that? Let's say you live in a neighborhood and you're not politically, as you said, you felt politically, certain counselors would be more sympathetic to you than others. I'm not saying which way that is. Wouldn't you think that your chances, I mean, the odds are better. There's a reason it's kind of called a science, that your chances of contacting 10 people, you're going to get a response or have somebody push back for you. Whereas if you only had one representative and that representative wasn't effective, wouldn't that be a concern of yours?
No, because I trust that if there were a ward system where, Mount Pleasant voted for their counselor on council, that counselor would thereby, have to bring up any concerns of the residents of the area they represent. That's kind of how democracy works. Like if I send a letter to an MP, then, you assume that that's your route into Parliament, or to my MLA into the provincial Parliament.
But what if they weren't aligned with you politically because you did bring up you chose one counselor specifically because of that? Can I just ask? I mean, is it 6 of one, half a dozen of another, or you actually feel that this would change things significantly?
I definitely think it would change things significantly, and I don't think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. And I think, as I said, I think the closer to the people the representative is, the more democratic it is. I wouldn't expect anybody elected in any neighborhood to necessarily agree with everything every resident ever said to them. However, they would feel constrained to listen to the concerns of the residents of the area they represent and hopefully bring them to council. Right?
Just yes,
And
no,
sorry, Councillor DiGenova, that is it for your time.
You cut me off before my 3 minutes. If you could not do that again, I'd really appreciate it because I did start 10 seconds late. Thank you so much.
Councillor DiGenova, I reset your timer at the very beginning. I gave you those extra 10 seconds. Councillor Fry, go ahead for up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. And much as I would love to get into a debate about representation of ward systems, which isn't really the subject of the conversation here, but
it is.
Yeah, no, we're supposed to stick to the actual Broadway plan. So, but I do want to focus and highlight something that you said about this plan may work for future residents, but it doesn't work for folks now. And that's a salient kind of sentiment. And I've unfortunately I had to miss the first session on these speakers because I was in Victoria, and I heard the premier very distinctly say we're expecting 100,000 people a year for the next 10 years in British Columbia. And the reality is a majority of them are going to be coming to Metro, and even more of them are going to be coming to Vancouver. So we have to accommodate more folks moving to Vancouver. That's a simple fact of the matter. We have a really low vacancy rate. What would satisfy you in accommodating those future residents, which we have to do?
Well, as I said, I think, I mean, part of the plan also is, as it's written and as it was presented by staff, I watched the meeting last Wednesday, um, uh, is to preserve and protect as well as provide new affordable housing. And it seems like, these potential residents, and this plan to me is not only designed to accommodate future residents, but actually to attract them. But why should it be low-cost renters who bear the brunt of the new development? Like, where are we supposed to go? Because this,
And I don't think low-cost renters should. So I think
right,
that we're on the same page there. I think there is
right,
articulation, and perhaps it could be more strengthened around how we protect renters. And it's not even low-cost renters. We're talking median income. We're not meeting
right.
the average income of the average Vancouverite, not just low-income folks. But so I guess what I'm getting at then is you're okay with adding more density. You're okay with adding more people. Obviously considering we got this new SkyTrain that's going in, you just want to see more robust protection for folks who are renting.
Definitely. And I don't think the RPP provides it. I don't think it's enforceable. I don't see how City Hall can chase down every developer and make sure that they're looking after every tenant. It's impossible. As for increased density, like I said, I love some of those homes on 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever. Some of them are very beautiful, but why can't those people decide to sell or not to sell? And why can't that area be upzoned? As opposed to an area that you and everybody else on council knows contains some of the last remaining affordable rental in Vancouver.
Sorry,
Less
Dave,
people
I'm out
would
of
be
time.
displaced, and those who
Sorry,
profit would
I'm
be
so sorry.
those who live there.
Councillor Fry is out of time. Thank you, Councillor Fry, and thank you so much. That is it for your speakers.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for coming in. That was great to see you in person. Okay, Council, I did call the name Andrea Mihaliuk, which was number 79, the number right before this. I'm just going to check again. The clerk informed me that he actually was on the line. So was Andrea Mihaliuk on the line now?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry that we skipped over you inadvertently, but go ahead. You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, Mayor and councilors. I am here today to express my opposition to the Broadway plan. Even before proposals started coming forward to densify the Broadway corridor to support this subway extension, renters in this area began noticing a familiar and unsettling trend. Out in the open or under their noses, their apartment buildings were going up for sale. If you glance through the listings on the Goodwin report, you'll find apartments sold over 2 years ago that touted the future subway as an attractive selling feature. So a change of owners doesn't necessarily always spell instant displacement, but frankly, people don't buy properties on the promise of a below-market return. And this is the constant tension of living as a tenant, that every time developers and landlords see dollar signs, we see the threat of our homes falling out of reach. The Broadway plan isn't a plan for renters, as much as some might pretend otherwise. Do a Control F of the 493-page document, and you'll find the phrase strengthened tenant protection come up 14 times. And there's other variations that come up even more than that. But this basically does the work of paying us lip service while tacitly acknowledging that the market doesn't care whether we can afford to stay. So, what are these strengthened tenant protections on offer? The right of first refusal at a rent 20% below citywide averages. Translation, a significant rent increase that punishes long-term tenants most of all. Even with Mayor Stewart's proposed amendment to permit returning at the same rent, there's no commitment to seeing that these rents stay low in the long term. Landlords still have every incentive to push out low-income tenants. Okay, what else? A temporary rent top-up if a tenant chooses to seek out interim housing. Translation, a paltry amount of temporary compensation where tenants must inevitably decide between staying in their more expensive interim housing or going through the labor of moving back again, probably at a higher rent. Both options are bad, and made even worse if tenants are low income, or seniors, or disabled, or all of the above. This is not even mentioning how any of this will be enforced. The current enforcement of the city's tenant relocation and protection policy doesn't inspire confidence, to say the least. In the end, we tenants don't want a pitiful handout and some links to Craigslist ads. We want the right to remain in our homes with dignity. Tenants in this city have been at the front lines of an affordability crisis for decades. If the market is out of reach for a unionized public sector worker such as myself, then how the hell is it supposed to work for those making minimum wage, or on income assistance, or on disability? In passing the Broadway plan, you submit to the logic that our livelihoods are and should remain in the hands of speculators, developers, and landlords. By this logic, I don't see development. I see displacement. Thank you.
And thank you. Your comments very well appreciated and very clear. No questions for you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We're on to speaker 81, Mary Down.
Point of privilege, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I just, because we went back to an earlier speaker, I didn't catch his name. Could you please repeat the name of the speaker?
Absolutely. It was speaker 79, Andre Mihaliuk, that just spoke.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Is 81 Mary Down on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Mary Down, a Vancouver resident. I'm opposed to the Broadway plan. First, there is the affordable rental fantasy. Will the towers of the Broadway plan actually improve our affordable rental problem? I've listened to countless speakers in support of the plan who assume that the plan will give them the affordable rents they want. Sadly, I think they will be disappointed. 80% of the rents in the new constructions will be market, which at the moment means over $3,000 per unit. The affordable units will be quite small and for the square footage quite a bit more expensive than the many existing older buildings that will eventually be demolished to build the towers. As Councillor Swanson pointed out, many of the affordable apartments in the new buildings will be taken up by the people who have been demo-evicted to make room for the towers. One wonders what will be left over for other renters who are hoping for affordable housing. I don't believe that the Broadway plan's main goal is affordable housing. I think it is about profits for the development community. New units to own or rent are more expensive and smaller than the older units being demolished. Land speculation will inflate land values and rents throughout the Broadway corridor, displacing renters who now enjoy affordable rents. This is already beginning to happen. I'm afraid that it will result in more expensive rents, not less. Let's look more closely at tenant protections promised by the mayor. The displacement of tenants in support of the Broadway plan ignores the psychological stress of displaced tenants having to move from a home and community that they have lived in for decades. To say that a tenant will be offered the right to return at a guaranteed below market rent is one thing, but a tenant will be evicted to where? They have nowhere affordable to go, only the promise to return in 3 or 5 years to another affordable unit of a much smaller size. What if they have kids in school? The only real protection for tenants would be if the units they were promised were built before they were evicted and they were offered those units to move directly to. Anything less than that is only paying lip service to tenant protection. One of the most important priorities of the city government is sustainability, but towers are the least sustainable form of development. The Broadway plan will lead to the construction of concrete skyscrapers, which consume more energy and have huge carbon footprints, not to mention the loss of trees and green spaces. The towers will shadow parks all the way to the waterfront. Many residents in towers will not do well in future heat domes or possible earthquakes. Heat domes may result in power outages, trapping residents without functioning elevators. Also, it takes paramedics longer to reach higher floors. Not a cheerful thought if you are elderly with heart problems living on the 40th floor. Studies have shown low to mid-range developments have 45% of the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions that high-rise developments for the same population density. The plan is undemocratic and breaks a bond of trust between Vancouver citizens and their civic government. The Broadway plan would evoke a host of community planning policies. It is deeply unfair and cynical to disregard all of the hard work put in by so many residents, unpaid, countless hours of work and commitment of people who have spent so much time and effort building communities in our many neighborhoods, to revoke these plans. There was once a time in Vancouver's history where planning was done with the community. In contrast, the Broadway plan is a top-down process driven by planning staff. Our chief city planner, Teresa O'Donnell, who has recently arrived in Vancouver from Dallas and Las Vegas, seems to have no knowledge of or interest in the various unique neighborhoods that make up our city. Why are we not planning collaboratively with citizen voices and opinions being valued? The plan is a developer's dream and a community nightmare. You were voted onto council by the people who live in Vancouver to represent our interests, not that of the development community. Please maintain the affordable housing that exists in Vancouver, much of it along the Broadway corridor. Saying yes to affordable housing may mean saying no to the Broadway plan. The stakes are very high for this beautiful, extraordinary city that we share. Thank you.
Thank you. And you do have some questions if you want to just hold on the line.
Sure.
Councillor Hardwick, go ahead, up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. A question I've asked before is, we do have a subway going down Broadway. There's got to be a form of development and density that accompanies it. What form do you think that should take? If not towers, what then?
Well, I'm thinking more six-story walk-ups like the Arbutus walkway. There actually is quite a bit of density there compared to what exists in towers. I mean, when you're building towers, there's all the lost elevator space and that sort of thing. My other question is, I mean, to this point, transit is going to Arbutus. It isn't a done deal that it is going from Arbutus to UBC. There was a really interesting editorial in the Globe and Mail a few weeks ago that talked about how much more efficient, actually, less expensive, and how many more people are reached by rapid bus service than by subways. And I don't have the article here with me at the very moment, but I know that they said for the same amount of money, the 5 kilometers from Arbutus to UBC, you could build something like 180 or 190 kilometers of rapid bus service through Vancouver. So I don't think that, I know that the rest of the subway is more Vancouver plan and not Broadway plan, but I don't think it's a done deal. And why not? I don't understand why we don't put more density through other parts of the city and have more rapid bus service. People talk about our 15-minute, within 15 minutes of shopping. Well, that would be great if we had, more density along 33rd, 41st, King Edward, Arbutus, Dunbar. Anyway, that's my answer to that question.
Well, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. That's it for your questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Council.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to Speaker 82, Maureen Charon.
Well, we certainly need density. I'm opposed to the Broadway plan because I don't think it does, we need affordability, not density. And I don't think the Broadway plan is getting us anywhere near to affordability. And I'm going to echo some of Patrick Condon's comments. I must say, after listening to the MST presentation last night on the Heatherlands, I have much more faith that they will be delivering affordable housing to Vancouver, and certainly it won't be coming from the Broadway plan. And one advantage of the Heatherlands project is it's not going to displace one person, which has been a major commentary of many people before me. First of all, I'm going to talk about my experiences from 1976. So I moved into the South Granville neighborhood, and the building is still there and well maintained, with a 9-year-old concrete 12-story high-rise. I had a large one-bedroom, and I paid $208.50, which, interestingly enough, converted to today's dollars, is slightly a bit over $1,000. So how did we get up to 2,200? So we've got a 220% increase over inflation in the rent for that apartment. So who's the beneficiary of this land lift? As Patrick Condon is suggesting, the owners of the properties and the developers. So why aren't we focused on getting the land lift from all the developers throughout the Broadway plan? And giving up CACs and DCLs is just insanity in my mind, because we keep rezoning, but rezoning doesn't get us there. Now let's look at when I was renting, what it required to pay 30% of your gross salary to rent. In today's dollars, that was $40,000. Now it's $88,000. I worked in the public sector my entire career in the IT area, and $88,000 was pretty close to what I earned at the end of a 37-year career. So I don't get this. There was a column that the mayor put into the Daily Hive that said night shift cleaners working at the hospital won't have to commute from Mission to downtown Vancouver because they're going to be able to rent in the Broadway corridor. I actually did the numbers and realized that $88,000 a year means you're making $45 an hour. Are cleaners making $45 an hour? I'm not sure the mayor did his homework. It's just stunning to me. I don't know who's going to be renting these places. They're not affordable. And even if you look at 20% off of the market, you're still looking at $70,000 a year, which means $36 an hour. So then I did a little trip down. I have not a full pension. I have only about 15 years of a pension from my employment. And my salary would not allow me to rent in this area today. My pension income, all I could rent for would be $1,675. So, oh my goodness, we're not building anything that anybody in a reasonable occupation is going to be able to live in. There won't be any retail workers there. There won't be any restaurant workers there. There won't be any cleaners there. So this plan isn't getting us anywhere to what it is we want to do, which is to have affordable housing for people. So the other point that I'm going to make is, kind of if we wait 5 years, the rents are going to be up around $2,800, although I hear people tell me they're already at $3,000. We're talking about $57 an hour. This is insanity. And there was a comment made earlier, kind of on Wednesday, that suggested as soon as we build rentals, they're full. They're not full at Arbutus Village, at just around Arbutus and 25th. They're advertising for all types: townhouses, 3-bedroom, 1-bedroom, studio. That was helped by the YWCA to be affordable housing, and yet it's still empty, which suggests it's not affordable. So,
and if you could just wrap it up, you've got about 5 seconds.
Okay, I just say that I really want you to send this back because we haven't done any planning for schools, daycares, parks, and all that other stuff, which should be absolutely required.
Thank you. Perfect. You don't have any questions, but thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
Okay.
Speaker 83, Ian Cromwell.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks very much for hearing me today. I'm here to speak in support of some of the features of the Broadway plan that I think are relevant to the arts and culture. My background is I've been running a called Locals Lounge for the past 6 years, which is a community incubator. In the course of doing this work, a big part of my role is understanding the needs of Vancouver's local music community and the arts and culture sector more broadly. Over the past 2 years since the onset of the pandemic, I've been doing a data collection exercise, asking people what their favorite parts of the music scene are, and also what things that they would like to change about Vancouver's music scene. And it probably won't surprise you too much to learn that among the top concerns of local musicians and the people who just enjoying local arts and culture is the lack of accessible and affordable spaces and a lack of performance venues. And in reading the Broadway plan, I was pleasantly surprised to see specific mention of nightlife and performance venues in multiple neighborhoods across the plan, including in Mount Pleasant, in South Granville, in the 12th and Kingsway area, and on the north end of Main Street. I think this is really encouraging to see arts and culture explicitly included in how the future of the city should progress. The arts and culture industry is a low emission and a high impact industry that employs thousands of Vancouverites. It is a crucial part of how we're going to recover as we exit the pandemic and how we're going to rebuild community. And so I'm really encouraged to see these innovations and the prioritization of protecting existing spaces in these plans. I also was encouraged by the use of the incorporation of creation spaces in the Mount Pleasant industrial area. I know that there are a number of arts and culture organizations and spaces currently using that area, and I think that there is a huge opportunity to really unlock the power and potential of a burgeoning arts and culture sector in these light industrial spaces that they can share with other forms of industry. I was also really, really encouraged by the creation of the cultural ribbon in the Creative District. For those unfamiliar, this is the area between Main and Clark along Great Northern Way that contains Emily Carr, VCC, and other locations that are crucial to the success of the arts and culture industry. The existence of the cultural ribbon, and particularly the prominence, the proposed prominence of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish art and culture and history in this area, I think is a necessary transformation of the city, both in terms of recognizing our role as a partner in reconciliation, but also in truly foregrounding the unique cultural history of this region that goes far back. If we are talking about the heritage of this land, then the cultural ribbon is a perfect encapsulation of that heritage and provides us all with an opportunity to connect and to collaborate and to understand our shared cultural history as settlers on this land or as Indigenous people on this land. I also note that area contains live workspaces for artists, which is a huge unmet need. Housing for artists. I'm very sympathetic to the comments raised by the last speaker about certain industries struggling with affordability. This is particularly true for artists and cultural creators who don't make a ton of money, and having places where they can live and work and collaborate and share and network and connect with each other is going to be crucial for the future of this city. If we are going to have if Vancouver is truly going to be a magnet for tourists, if we're going to actually have any kind of a cultural impact, it is incumbent upon us to invest in the future of the arts and culture industry in this city. And I think that there are elements in the Broadway plan that do that. I'm encouraged to see it, and I hope that whatever final form this plan takes, that those arts and culture items are preserved and even strengthened beyond what they are currently. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't mind holding on to on the line, you've got questions. Councillor Weeb, go ahead, up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, you talked about the cultural ribbon and putting housing there. There are some concerns about some of the jam spaces and the loss of jam spaces in Mount Pleasant, recognizing there's so few left. Can you speak about the need for the type of space to create art and the need for us to ensure that we put that into the Mount Pleasant plan? And you said there's an opportunity to add to the policy to ensure we're protecting arts and culture spaces. Can you talk about what you would like to see added to this plan that would help us ensure that we are preserving and protecting more arts and culture here in Vancouver.
Absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Wade. I'll try to answer this as quickly as I can. Jam spaces and places for arts creation. I mean, I can speak as a musician just to say that these are not just spaces to do work. These are spaces to build connection to decent community. Very crucially important to social fabric and civic involvement, and things that ought to be protected and made more available. I think that it is obvious that there's a collision between residential needs and noise, but I think that those concerns can be mediated through smart planning, and I'm hoping that there will be an increase in the availability of those spaces either there or in the industrial area where there's less residential conflict. As far as strengthening existing spaces, I think first of all there should be some sort of cultural heritage zoning, some sort of protection for spaces that exist, particularly in the Mount Pleasant industrial area. I'm thinking of the Anza Club and the Redgate Art Society in particular, among many others that exist in that space, as the few accessible and affordable venues for local music, local arts, local culture. This is the changes that are made in this Broadway plan should preserve the things that are currently working, and looking for ways to strengthen and protect the longevity of the venues operating there. I leave it to staff and to the ongoing work of the music plan to come up with some of the specific remedies, but there is mention of certain strategies and certain revenue tools in the music strategy and in the creative strategy to help alleviate some of the costs for venue operators.
Thank you. Appreciate those answers.
Thanks, Councillor Weep. And that's it for your questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Speaker 84, Alvin Locke.
Speaker 84 is not on the line.
Okay, Speaker 85, Danielle Peacock. Oh, great. Thank you. Welcome to City Hall Chambers.
Thank you. So,
go ahead.
Ready to go? Okay.
Yes, you are ready to go.
I'm representing the Mount Pleasant Heritage Group, and we are speaking about the Main Street Village section. Our members have been engaged in the community for 15 years, starting with the 2010 Mount Pleasant Community Plan and 2013 Implementation Package. The group, born out of that experience, has been engaged with and encouraged by the community since 2013. We have seen the neighborhood change greatly, yet the artistic and working class vibe has persisted for now. As stewards for our community, we took it upon ourselves to engage with the city during the Broadway plan process. We met with many of you during its early phase to discuss having Mount Pleasant's unique village area, affectionately known as the Heritage Heart, declared a heritage district with a heritage management plan. We are grateful to the Broadway planning team for meeting with us several times over the last 2 years. In March, we were invited to the Heritage Stakeholder Workshop with consultants James Burton and Marta Fairvag. This was a lively and welcome session, but much too late in the process to solidify details of conservation strategies. We appreciate this opportunity to respond to the plan. Our request today is for stronger language to ensure a management plan for the area is fulfilled, and until this is done, that no new development applications are considered, and that the proposed zoning revisions entertained in sections MMSA and B are reconsidered and reimagined to ensure the existing culture and vitality of the street and area is maintained. It is important to recognize that the area we are discussing is only 0.9% of the overall area of the Broadway plan and only 2% of the area of Mount Pleasant in the plan. The plan recognizes how cherished the villages are and how important they've been historically as major commercial cultural hubs, making them representative of community heritage identity with special value. It is crucial that the people, many independent and diverse businesses, and social groups that breathe the life into the village are not priced out of a neighborhood that they have been a part of for years and for some decades. These businesses include legacy businesses like the legendary Pulp Fiction Books, established in 2000, and the family-run Indian restaurant Nirvana, in operation for decades. Small businesses owned by women, like Antisocial Skateboard, Budgie's Burritos, Much and Little selling socially conscious goods from around the world, Rath Art Supplies, Dig at Select Vintage, and Doc Lunch, a bijou eatery. Community gathering spots like Jean Coffee Bar in the Triangle Building, which was featured in the essay Social Forms of Engagement, Coffee with Yucks Whalupton on the Main Street side of Jean. This was part of MOA's book documenting Lawrence Paul's exhibition Unceded Territories. The Fox Cabaret, a popular non-traditional performance space. The Mount Pleasant Legion, a hub for social connection for all ages. Donna and Judy, twin sisters about to turn 80, have been playing bingo there since the early 1960s. And the amazing third floor gym is home to a parkour school. Between 10th and 12th Avenues alone, there are 19 independents catering to diverse needs, including a laundromat, a bike store, Lucy's 24-hour diner, and Pinot Corner store, selling Filipino products. Equally important are the over 130 existing affordable rental suites, often discreetly tucked into older mixed-use buildings. A mom with a toddler living in one of the 1907 Mason block townhouses said she loved her two-story residence. Another young creative was ecstatic to relocate from the suburbs to Maine and could only do so when a suite above antisocial became available. According to the plan, quote, there are many places and features within the area that embody heritage values. Identifying these, both tangible and intangible, helps inform the community and the city about opportunities for stewardship. Celebrating and protecting the area's heritage assets will contribute to the cohesion and continued sense of place of the community, end quote. This is exactly what we want. That the Main Street Village is formally declared a heritage district with a heritage management plan. This legacy high street was and remains a vibrant area, the living room of the community. Our vision, when people emerge from the subway, it's into Mount Pleasant's vibrant and distinct heritage heart, and not a generic could-be-anywhere intersection. And I would like to quickly add to our remarks that you may have gotten the impression from Jeff Holmes, Speaker 26, that we support his company's proposal for a 16 to 18-story tower in the Triangle Block. We do not. We were happy to meet with him last June and included local historian Bruce McDonald. Nothing like that proposal was mentioned. In fact, Jeff said they weren't thinking of anything like the high-rise independent, and that in previous developments in Victoria, they had gone wide. Thank you for hearing us, and for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Good timing. There are no questions for you, but really appreciate you coming into council chambers in particular. Thank you.
I
Oh,
actually
wait a
have a
second.
question.
Oops, sorry. Added on a little late. You do have questions, if you wouldn't mind returning to the podium. Great. Go ahead, Councillor Weave, up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I have a question. Recognizing involvement of the Mount Pleasant plan, can you talk about the difference from that plan and this plan in relation to heritage preservation and ensuring that the heart of Mount Pleasant is continued?
Well, the zoning in the Mount Pleasant Community Plan called for the area that's called the Heritage Heart to stay at the existing scale and character. And I think that policy and maintaining the existing zoning has kind of what's allowed the heart to exist the way it has and to have all this vibrant stuff going on. At the workshop, and I just would like to say that the heritage part of the plan started late. The consultants were only hired in February, and so we talked about that. And since then, between March and May, they've recognized the village as a heritage district and said that the heritage work is going to continue. And we'd very much like to be involved with that. And that one of the things that will most allow it, and they recognize that not only as a heritage precinct, but also as an arts and cultural area, and that one of the things, the best tool for keeping it alive the way it is to keep the existing scale and character. So, there's similarities, and this is why we're asking for a management plan before any new development is considered, so that we can make sure that we manage the change, so that we hold on to what is so cherished about that area. Change is coming. And I just want to say that a management plan would also fit into the Broadway Plan social cultural assessment that they're doing, that's supposed to look at the way that new land use policy may impact all of these, you know, tangible and intangible assets that create the social and cultural fabric of the neighborhood. I don't know if that answers you enough.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for coming in today.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. Okay, moving on to Speaker 86, Christine Barker.
Speaker 86 is not on the line.
Speaker 87, Ruth Cherry. Ruth Cherry, are you there?
Speaker 87 is not on the line.
Okay, Speaker 88, Maury Ford.
And I think that you can probably hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Great. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory, the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I am a resident of Vancouver. I live in the Mount Pleasant area, and I am a homeowner. I am in favor of the plan. I am appreciating so much of the time that you as councillors are putting into this. I'm pleased also that you as councillors have decided to tackle this issue, and that I believe also that the city planners have put a great deal of thought into the plan. I appreciate the fact that it takes into consideration newcomers. It takes into consideration some of the climate crisis, and as many of the other speakers have gone on and spoken about, will have greater diversity and equity was considered. However, there is one suggestion that I would like to make, which is about an amendment to one particular area that is zoned. It's a small strip. It's about 4 to 5 blocks, and it runs from that Kingsway corner up Broadway going towards the north to up Fraser going north towards Broadway. The plan as it is now has that strip zoned in dark red, or in the plan it's referred to as MRTC. And myself, many of my neighbors, and I, as we've had many coffee meetings about the Broadway plan and participated in the surveys, etc., would suggest that that particular strip, which again is 4 to 5 blocks long, needs to be zoned instead as an MRTA, or more like a yellow zone. Can you still hear me?
We can.
Great. This takes those 4 blocks from being a mid-high rise to a residential apartment zoned area. And we believe that that strip, if zoned for residential apartments, fits much better within the plan as the Broadway plan is, and it fits much better within our own community as it exists now. We would be much more supportive of the Broadway plan if that particular strip was not zoned to be residential. We feel it was not zoned to be tall buildings. We feel that we'll be choked out of supplying the kind of community that we have now for the people that live in this area now. Yeah, that's basically our main point. We would like to see an amendment to that strip.
Great, thank you. You've been very clear. And there are no questions, but probably because you've been very clear. So thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you too.
Speaker 89, Chan Han-go.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chan Han-go, and I'm here to speak to you today about Go Ballet Academy and its location within the Heritage Building at Main Street and East 8th Avenue. The Go Valley Heritage Building is centrally located and is within close walking distance to the future Mount Pleasant SkyTrain station. The property falls within the Main Street Village area of the Broadway plan, with which I have some serious concerns. The plan as it stands contemplates a density of 3.0 FSR and a maximum height of 8 to 9 stories for projects that include heritage conservation and secured rental. It should be noted under the village designation that is now being contemplated for our area that the city's Mount Pleasant Community Center on the east side of Broadway Triangle and just across the street from us would have exceeded these maximum heights. Further, the neighboring adjacent policy areas, MCEG and MCEA in the Broadway plan, bordering our site, proposes much higher height at 20 to 30 stories. It is important to mention that the Independent by Rise, which exists today only a few blocks away from us, is at a height of 21 stories. The Independent makes an excellent case study for higher towers in this area. What is most concerning is that this plan does not seem to take into consideration ways to ensure Go Valley Academy can continue supporting the emerging and professional artists as we have for the past 45 years. As it stands, the plan you are considering right now will not allow us to save this beautiful heritage building and continue to operate Go Valley Academy at our Main Street location. My family has a vision for the property that would culminate, that would be a combination of decades of dedication to the arts and culture in this city. It includes the restoration and retention of the building where new studios for Go Ballet would continue its legacy as a world-class cultural institution serving Mount Pleasant, serving our city and the region. In addition, our goal is to offer some accommodation options to students. We would like to provide new rental homes above the heritage structure that would be dedicated to students, artists, and the community. Throughout the past few years, we have explored development options, and the studies indicate that 8 to 9 stories will not make our project viable. As such, I would like to formally request specific amendments to the contemplated Broadway plan to allow Go Ballet Academy to continue contributing to the growth and vitality of the Mount Pleasant community for generations to come. Please amend the permitted density of 3.0 FSR with ability to increase with rental housing to allow for density of 10 to 12 FSR. Our proposal has the potential to realize heritage conservation, supporting cultural venues in the neighborhood, and creating low-carbon rental housing. To be financially viable, the FSR needs to be proportionate to the project's objectives. Please amend the permitted height of the building from 8 to 9 stories with heritage conservation and secured rental to 14 stories. Our floor plates are approximately 4,000 square feet, and given the site constraints, 9 stories would be insufficient to create any economies of scale for 100% rental project with a very expensive heritage restoration requirement. To achieve many benefits our proposal stands to offer the city, our project would need a height at a minimum of 14 stories in conjunction with an increased FSR. The current plan does not consider the cost implications of upgrading a heritage building or the economics of running a small, globally competitive ballet academy. We are a ballet academy which offers significant financial aid to our students. Go Ballet Academy today cannot continue as only a small studio on this site. We must find ways to support our arts and cultural institutions if they are to continue serving future generations in Vancouver. Without the tool of the Heritage Bank available, we must also find ways to support significant heritage renewal and preservation. We need your understanding and your support to ensure that our cultural institutions, like ours, will not be forced to relocate or to close. Supporting heritage preservation and arts and culture in Vancouver can only benefit our city and the communities within it. We need you to do just that with a project that will also add much needed housing to our city and contribute meaningfully to its sustainability goals. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for your time. You do have questions, so please stay on the line. Councillor Weeb, go ahead, up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for coming to speak. We've had a few speakers talk about the importance of arts and culture spaces. Do you think it's something we should be looking at is giving extra FSR, not only for heritage, but for covenants put on place to keep arts and culture spaces in these integral neighborhoods?
The city, in my opinion, does not have enough venues and enough space for arts and culture. We struggle a lot, and it only gets harder with owners asking for more rent. And so any help to allow sustainability for arts and culture, I am in for.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for what you do for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's it for your questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Okay, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so we are now on to speaker 90, Lily Christ.
Speaker 90 is not on the line.
Okay, speaker 91, Sean Nardi.
Speaker 91 is not on the line.
Speaker 92.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, Sean Nardi, go ahead. Up to 5 minutes for council.
You can hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly.
Excellent. Chair and Council, my name is Sean Nardi. I live in Fairview, and I ask Council to receive the Broadway plan and refer it back to staff. The Broadway planning program is a failure of democracy, affordability, sustainability, and livability. This plan fails on transparent, neighborhood-driven democracy. I've participated in every aspect of the Broadway plan since day one, and despite the rosy statistics that staff have shared with you, I can tell you that the planning process has been grossly mishandled and manipulated throughout, even before it began. Multiple Freedom of Information requests going as far back as 2012 demonstrate that staff have had specific heights and densities in mind years before the public engagement began. In fact, Brent Chodwin said on CKNW that staff have been working on the Broadway plan since 2012. The evidence demonstrating this abuse of the public's trust has been shared with Council on several occasions over the past 3 years.
Sean, excuse me. As a speaker to Council, I ask that you actually don't impugn motives or in any way speak in a derogatory way about our staff. Hold your comments to the actual substantive issues that you would like to raise, but not around your opinions around staff.
These are not my opinions, Madam Chair. These are all based on facts that I've shared with you in writing and with your fellow councillors as well. But I'll conclude this section of my my presentation and move on to other topics. If you'd restore my time, please.
No, go ahead.
Please restore my time. I will note that the Vancouver plan that unlike the Vancouver plan, none of the Broadway plan surveys ever asked the respondents what heights and densities they supported. This plan fails on affordability. 95% of Fairview is already multifamily dwellings and 60% are rentals. The massive upzonings proposed will place immense pressure on that existing affordable rental stock, fueling inflation and gentrification. When compared to the MERP program, the plan actually raises the affordable rents and weakens rent controls while sweetening the incentives for developers. City staff have already shamelessly served notice to the Heritage Housing Co-op, advising that if the plan passes, the residents will be evicted and the building will be redeveloped. That is a fact. As soon as you permitted the rezoning to be considered at 1477 West Broadway, the property kitty corner was relisted for $9 million more. And there are 2 rental buildings on 10th Avenue listed for sale with Colliers. One of them notes that 23% of the units are being held vacant for, quote, immediate repositioning and rental upside realization. The Vancouver Tenants Union said it well, this plan is a strategy to push out existing affordable rentals. The plan fails on sustainability in spades. It is completely out of sync with contemporary sustainability thinking, such as donut economics, which seeks to achieve equilibrium respecting the planetary boundaries and social foundations. In fact, BC Hydro and City research demonstrate that the Broadway plan will be completely unsustainable, leading to the destruction of existing wood frame buildings and the replacement with concrete skyscrapers, which consume more energy and have massive embodied emissions. If all 30,000 homes proposed in the plan were produced in 6-story wood frame buildings instead of concrete towers, the emission savings would be equivalent to taking 3,000 cars off the road for the 30-year life of the plan. Do the math. This plan fails on livability. It doesn't contain any detailed plans for new schools, parks, senior centers, community centers, libraries, or other amenities which are needed to support the population growth. Did you know that the supportive policy agreement actually requires this? And the city hasn't done it. The plan talks about existing amenities and provides estimates for the 10-year, $1.2 billion public benefit strategy, but the small print advises that the capital may not be available for these public benefits and that construction will be spread over 30 years. Competent urban planners tell me that this kind of negligence in a plan of this size is unprecedented in Vancouver. The Broadway plan contains a lot of nice promises about Broadway as a great street, children riding their bikes to school in distant neighborhoods, no doubt, but it contains serious errors and glaring gaps that will decrease affordability and livability in our community, and many outcomes that you see in the draft were foregone conclusions before it even began. The plan encourages unsustainable development that is contrary to contemporary sustainability thinking, and it will dramatically reduce the livability of already dense, successful neighborhoods. Everything about the plan is in complete defiance of the best research available on building sustainable, affordable housing and healthy communities with the amenities, merchants, and supports that families, seniors, and people of all types need. Having participated in every phase of the plan and read every document, if I believed that the Broadway plan was going to improve our neighborhoods and make progress on our most serious problems, I would support it in a heartbeat. But when you look past the cheerful photos, what you see is a real estate marketing exercise that will gut our communities. Please receive the plan for information and refer it back to staff for additional work. Thank you.
Thank you. You have questions, so just stay on the line. Go ahead, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Sean. The Broadway plan, the subway, it's underway, it's happening. If we don't go with the current plan, what do we do from your perspective?
I think that there's a lot we are already doing, Councillor, and that we can continue to do. The neighborhood that I live in fact, already has 3 buildings that were approved under existing development permits. And so we're adding additional density already, and we can do more. We can continue to do more within the existing zoning. And I'm speaking strictly about Fairview and the community that I live in. We are already in an existing dense community, and we are adding more density to that community that is within zoning, that is within that C3A permitted, 12 to 14 stories. And that seems, that is a healthy balance that I know a lot myself and a lot of my neighbors agree with. And I think there's an opportunity in those within zoning to add that to add those rentals that our city badly needs.
So your 4 points were democracy, affordability, sustainability, and livability. Did I get that right?
Yes, ma'am.
4. Okay. Thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it for your questions. Appreciate you very much coming to speak to council.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And council, we do not have time for another speaker. It's a couple of minutes to 5. So the standing committee is now recessed until tomorrow, Thursday, May 26th, 2022 at 3 p.m. We'll run from 3 to 10 tomorrow with a 1-hour dinner break from 5 to 6. And the backup date to that is May 31st, which we also have booked for 3 to 10. So have a good evening, everyone.